Tonight on What the Heck Do I Know's PM Update, Work Primed, and Home Insight segments, we're talking about responsibility, what it is, why it is important, and how to learn it. Responsibility is one of the biggest elements of growth between being an adolescent and adult. Most people learn about responsibility steadily as they grow up, either through modeling behaviors of those around them or through expectations at home or at work. Not everyone is so fortunate to have good role models, though, or perhaps they didn't appreciate the value of learning them when they were younger and needed to improve. Are you interested in learning how to be more responsible? Stick around for stories on how two special people did this. Hey guys, I really enjoy making these videos for you, so if you get value from them or know someone who would, please support us by hitting like, subscribe, leaving comments, and sharing. What the Heck Do I Know presents PM Update with Leah and Mia. And now your host, Leah. Welcome back to PM Update. I'm Leah. Tonight we're talking about responsibility and its synonym, duty. Both words describe things that we should do, either for ourselves or others. How you act and the things you do for yourself and others has a big impact on how they treat you in return and their perception of you. And so, how responsible you are can have a big effect on your work and personal life. If you weren't fortunate enough to learn these skills at a young age, you might be missing out on opportunities now. Don't worry though, you can learn how to be more responsible if you put some time and effort into it. Mia has a couple of stories for us this week that show how two people did just that. Mia, what do you have for us this week? Our first story is about Faye Ferguson. Last year, she was an aspiring project manager who was repeatedly being passed over for a promotion. After a heart-to-heart with her best friend, she learned some truths about responsibility and made some changes that helped her eventually move up in her company. Our second story is about a young married couple named Tina and Taylor Thomas. Tina grew up in a household where everyone was expected to not only be responsible for themselves, but for the family unit. Taylor did not. For a while, it caused some friction in their household. I can't wait to see these stories, Mia. But first, it's time now for our first quote question in the show. Do you know who said, leadership is about taking responsibility, not making excuses? The answer to this and Mia's stories up next. Last year, Faye had been working for a company for 5 years and was passed over for promotion twice. After she got the news that someone junior to her would be taking on the big new project that she was hoping for, she was understandably upset. She met with her best friend Fiona that evening to vent about the unfairness of it all, but instead managed to gain some perspective on her situation and actions. As they sat down to chat, Faye started right in on the unfairness of her situation. How she was more qualified for the position than her newer coworker, Frank, because she was already PMP certified and Frank hadn't taken the exam yet. She had also been with the company for 2 more years. She felt they gave the position to Frank because he was better friends with the boss than she was. Being the diplomat, Fiona asked how successful her last couple of projects were. Was there anything that had gone wrong that might have contributed to their decision? Faye explained that there are always things that go wrong on a project. Her last 2 finished late, and one of them went way over budget, but it wasn't her fault. The team wasn't turning in reports on time, and she wasn't getting the right numbers on what they were spending. One of the vendors was overcharging them from the original quote, and no one told her until they were almost done. Fiona explained that those things might not be her fault, but they were definitely her responsibility as the project manager. Faye was still pretty upset about what had happened at work and wasn't really ready to hear what Fiona had to say, so she stormed off. But she thought about it all the way home and the rest of the night. She thought about the cost meetings she had missed because she was busy doing other things. and about how her boss made a few comments about her coming in late on a fairly regular basis. At the time, she didn't think these things mattered much because she worked as hard as anyone. But maybe they did. Before she went to bed, she called Fiona to apologize for getting angry. After Faye apologized, she admitted that she could have done better. When she thought about how she hadn't really done all that she could and had not taken responsibility for the mistakes, even if they weren't her fault, the projects had not been successful, and her fault or not, it was her responsibility to fix things that went wrong and ask for help if she wasn't able to do it. Fiona agreed with her and asked how she was going to fix it now. Faye didn't understand at first because these projects were over and there was nothing left to fix. "No," Fiona said. "How are you going to be more responsible at work and fix this situation of always being passed over for promotion?" Faye wasn't sure, so she decided to think about it over the weekend. The next day, Faye did some thinking on her own and asked for advice from family and friends. Her mom recalled that she was always a chaotic mess in the mornings when she was in school. Taking time in the evening to get everything ready for the morning would help her get to work on time. Her dad pointed out that she had an annoying habit at times of not following through on commitments. He reminded her of all the times she went without an allowance for the week because she went out with her friends instead of doing chores. Or the time she lost a good babysitting client because she wrote down the wrong date and did not check with them to confirm. Her dad told her that being responsible means doing what you say you're going to do and following up when things don't look right. Faye realized that the things her family and friends mentioned were things she should be doing at work, so she decided to meet with her boss on Monday morning to talk it through. When Faye went in the next morning, she made an appointment with her boss for that afternoon. She told him that she was upset when she found she was not selected for the promotion last Friday, and after some reflection, acknowledged that there was probably legitimate reasons for that, and she wanted to do better. First, she outlined the areas where she knew that she needed to improve, like showing up on time, attending all meetings, and following through on everything. Then she asked him to help her identify any other things that he would like to see improvement on. Her boss told her that he was glad she wanted to start working on her lack of responsibility, and that the list she had was a great start. He told her that when he was starting out, what helped him feel more responsible was taking ownership of it all, as if he owned the project, as if he owned all of the successes and failures in the process. Not that he took credit for all the good stuff, since you are always part of the team, but when people aren't performing like you expect them to, it makes you think about how you can help them do it instead of blaming them for not doing it your way. He warned her that it wouldn't be easy at first, that there will be times when she feels like it is too much, especially when things are going wrong. That's when you need to ask for help from your team. Some of them may surprise you with the solutions they can come up with, and if the team can't help, his door is always open. It is his job to get her the resources she needs to get the job done. So if she has trouble, just ask. Faye's trouble started with personal responsibility. She ignored the lessons in her earlier life, and it eventually turned into a problem with professional responsibility. She did her job, but the way she did it was not her best, and she knew it. She wasn't investing in her work or holding herself accountable. Her team saw her poor behavior and responded accordingly. When she showed up late and missed meetings, they assumed that the work wasn't that important. When she didn't seem engaged, they didn't think it was their job to point out things that might be a problem later on. She started making changes with her next assignment, and her project performance improved over time. This year, she was selected for promotion instead of being passed over again, and she is on much better terms with her boss and her team. In this situation, Faye's company was not about to give her more responsibility until she learned how to be more responsible. It is so much better when you can learn about your possible failings from friends and family rather than having them forced on you by an authority figure. Better even when you can recognize it yourself and make these adjustments yourself. but sometimes you're just too close to see things clearly. That's where the family and friends come in. How about you? Have you ever had a friend help you out of a situation like this? If so, let us know in the comments. And now, the answer to our quote question from the top of the show. Do you know who said, leadership is about taking responsibility and not making excuses? It was businessman, USA politician Mitt Romney. And for our second quote question, do you know who said there are two primary choices in life, to accept conditions as they exist or accept the responsibility for changing them? In the second half of our show, Mia has a home insight segment where a couple is working out their responsibilities to each other. That story and the answer to our second quote question coming right up. Tina and Taylor are a newlywed couple and having some fairly typical newlywed friction when it comes to running the household they have just created together. Tina feels like her responsibility level has doubled since they moved in together. Taylor feels like Tina is spending a lot of time nagging him and not being very nice. This is the story of how they managed to work through their irritation with each other and learned how to take responsibility for themselves and each other. As newlyweds, Tina and Taylor were off to a bit of a rough start. Once the honeymoon was over and they were settling into living together, Tina noticed that Taylor did not take the initiative to help with the household chores, except for taking out the garbage and mowing the lawn once a week. He wasn't even picking up after himself. This led to frustrations on both sides and a not very pleasant first month of living together. Tina was constantly having to ask him to do things, and after a couple of weeks of this, she was getting resentful, and Taylor was starting to roll his eyes every time she asked. It all came to a head one weekend when she asked Taylor to help with the laundry, and he washed a load of colored clothes, including a bright new red shirt, in hot water, and everything came out pink. After a short argument about ruined clothing and why a grown man didn't know how to do his own laundry, they decided to give each other some space and talk about it later. While they were walking and talking it out, Tina realized that over the last couple of weeks, Taylor was willing to do help when she asked, but didn't do anything on his own. Most of the stuff she asked him to do, he didn't really know how. She realized that he never learned how to take care of himself in many ways because he'd never had to do it before. Taylor felt like Tina was being very mean. It wasn't his fault he didn't know how to do some of the things or what she needed to be done. He had never had to do those things before. By the time they got back to the house, they both realized that they could make some improvements. Tina agreed to be less judgmental and set clear expectations, and to take responsibility of showing him how to do some of the tasks she thought should be shared, like cooking and laundry. They made a list of daily, weekly, and monthly tasks, and for the next couple of weeks they did all of the tasks together, so that Tina could show Taylor how to do them all. They enjoyed doing the tasks together as a team, and since she was teaching, Tina got to show Taylor the way she liked to do certain things and why. Cooking was the hardest task for Taylor to learn, since there were so many variations, and it was really a long-term skill. They decided to compromise on this one, and Taylor learned a couple of simple dishes that he could make well, so when it was his turn to cook, they wouldn't be ordering takeout all the time. Taylor figured out the laundry much easier than cooking, and decided he liked it better than the rest of the household responsibilities, since he could play video games or do other things while the wash and dry cycles were going. Tina took the initial responsibility of posting the daily, weekly, and monthly chore list they created on the fridge with an open spot for check marks. Neither one was assigned any tasks, but they could both easily see at a glance what needed to be done and what was already complete. This way, both of them were responsible for making sure the necessary tasks were getting done, and no one needed to remind anyone else of their duties. When either of them had spare time, they could check the list and just check it off when it was complete. On the days and weeks where Taylor was particularly busy or working long hours, Tina would pick up and do more around the house. and Taylor would do the same for her when she was busy with other things. After the first 6 months of marriage, things were going a lot better for Taylor and Tina. They weren't arguing about the household responsibilities anymore, and there were no more pink clothes mishaps. Taylor actually felt a sense of accomplishment and growth from learning new things and taking responsibility, not only for himself, but the household. Tina felt like the weight of managing everything was now being shared. Learning how to take responsibility for yourself is normally one of the first things you learn as a kid. In Taylor's case, he learned the basics of personal hygiene, dressing, and getting himself up in the morning, but never needed to pick up after himself because someone else always did that for him. He was also never taught how to work around the house because he was never expected to do it. That didn't make him a bad person. He just needed to learn some new levels of personal responsibility. This story about Tina and Taylor is fairly common, even if not as extreme as Taylor not knowing how to do anything around the house. Both partners need to be willing to do the work and improve on their personal responsibilities by picking up after themselves, but also working on team responsibilities like taking care of the home. Sharing tasks can make them much easier to do and turn something that is normally a chore into something fun to do with a partner. The key to learning responsibility on your own is recognizing that you need to do it and getting someone to show you how. Whether that's your spouse, boss, best friend, or an online article doesn't matter as long as you can learn the lessons. Now, to answer our second quote question for the day, do you know who said there are two primary choices in life? To accept conditions as they are, or accept responsibility for changing them? It was best-selling author, motivational speaker, and consultant Dennis E. Waitley. Now that's all I have for What the Heck Do I Know's PM Update with Leah and Mia, and our Work Primed and Home Insight segment for this week. Thank you for watching, and see you next time on our next episode of PM Update. Good night. Hey there, before you go, don't forget to support these videos by hitting like and subscribe. I love seeing your comments too.